So welcome everyone to our March Let's Talk Solutions FIMS edition. Today we're going to be covering the general ledger, automatic entries, and cash management features. A couple of housekeeping notes is we are recording this, and you'll be able to find a link to this and previous recordings on our knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A or in the chat, but preferably in the Q&A. If you haven't met me yet, I'm Amy Strom, and today you'll be hearing from Robin, our infamous Robin. Looks like more people are joining. Great. Let's take a quick look at our agenda. So today we'll be talking about automatic entries and our cash management features. Robin's going to be covering allocation and entries, entries from the journal history, purging unposted entries, and then under cash management, the automatic cash entries, the cash call, as well as asset rebalancing. So with that, I think Robin, take it away.
Thanks, Amy. Welcome, everybody. Let me share my screen so you can see my FIMS. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my FIMS at this point. So we're talking about automatic entries in the general ledger module. So I'm going to bring up the general ledger module, and I'm going to make this a little bigger. Okay, so under the journal entry super tab, there's a small tab called automatic entries. We don't have time to talk about all of these today, so I picked a few of them to discuss during our session today. And the first one is allocation and entries. So just as kind of like a little bit of an overview, these automatic entry routines basically help you streamline the process of creating or modifying journal entries. It will save you some time, especially if you need to create lots of journal entries. Automatic entries will help you with that. And the first one I have here is allocation and entries. So allocation and entries has a couple different uses. One of them, let's say that you receive a dividend check from a custodian. They didn't put the money directly into the account. They sent you an actual check. You now need to turn around and allocate that dividend check to all of the funds that might have money in that investment pool. Allocation and entries can help with that. Another example of what you might use allocation and entries for would be when you run your admin fees. Instead of crediting a cash account and taking that money immediately, maybe you are crediting a payable account. So 2 weeks from now, when you actually collect those admin fees, you need to zero out all of those payable accounts, and there could be quite a few. Allocation and entries will help you do that as well, so you don't have to create manual entries and you don't have to import journal entries. So I'm going to go into allocation and entries. And this is what the screen actually looks like. So for allocation and entries, we've got a different couple ways you can do this. So you can base the allocation on a single fund balance, or you can base the allocation on the values in a specific GL account. You can pick the period of time you want FIMS to look at the data. So let me walk through. The first one would be how to allocate dividends. So up here, you've got base allocations on general ledger data from and through a period. And on the right-hand side, you have your fiscal year field. So in this case, I'm going to leave my 2024 just as it is. And I'm going to change this through period 12. And I'm going to choose my apply date as 12/31/2024. So what I'm telling the system is look at period 12, 2024. My GL apply date is going to be 12/31. And what I want to base my allocations on is the money in assets in pool A. For this particular example. So I'm telling the system that the basis is what is in the 14,000 account for the FIMS that are for the funds that are going to be receiving a share of the dividends. Now there's two ways to allocate. You can allocate a specific dollar amount or you can allocate a percentage. And I'll show you what the percentage one looks like. That's going to be, we're going to use that example for zeroing out the admin fee payable account. So I'm going to say we're going to put in $38,000 that needs to be allocated. You choose your debit and credit account. So because I'm doing this based on the funds that are in pool A, my debit account is going to be my 14,000 account and my credit account is going to be my dividend income. So let me find. Here's my dividend income. Now, when I say okay here, I'm getting an additional screen. So if you wanted to add an additional filter other than just the fact that these funds have to have money in the 14,000 account, you could do that from here. So you could choose a fund, you've got division, class, type, subtype, your fund coding. It could be based on a admin fee code, could be based on a spending policy code. So lots of ways you can put an additional filter. For this example, I'm not filtering anything other than the fact that the fund has money in 14,000. So when I run my report, this is showing me that, let me make this bigger, that I have 4 funds that have money in 14,000. This is what the basis amount is. Unfortunately, let me redo this because there's no money in there. They're all negative. All right. Let me put my GL accounts in here. And find my dividend income. Okay. So I have a full listing of funds that actually have money in the 14,000 account. So if you look at this basis amount right here, this is essentially telling me how much money that fund has in the pool. And based on its share in the investment pool, the next column, journal entry allocation, that's how much it's receiving of that $38,000 that's being allocated. Now, if you look at the end of that journal entry allocation, it says it's $38,002.04. That's because I have 2 funds that have a negative balance in the pool. So essentially, it is charging dividends to the fund for having borrowed dollars from the pool. But the total amount that's being allocated is $38,000. And then you've got your 2 columns for your debit account, your credit account. Make sure that that works appropriately. You can see that the 48,000 and the 14,000 are reversed for the 2 that are in the negative. And up on the menu bar, you have the ability to create GL entries. So this will create all the journal entries for you. So you just need to deposit the check. So that's one way you can use allocation and entries. Another way would be to base it on, for example, I'm not sure what I have here, but let's see. Let me find my grants payable. Let me see. Okay, so I'm just going to put my grants payable. This isn't actually an account that you would use, but if you wanted to base your allocation on what was in the payable account, we'll say this is admin fee payable. Down here, instead of putting in a dollar amount, you're going to say to allocate 100%. So whatever happens to be in that admin fee payable account, 100%, my debit and credit accounts right here. So I'm going to debit that admin fee payable account, and I'm going to credit whatever cash account the money is coming out of. So this is also going to run a report for me. It's going to show me what the balance is for all those funds that have a balance in the admin fee payable, and then it will auto create the entries for me. So you would still, in that instance, you would still have to make one summary entry in your operating fund to put the dollars in there and reduce the receivable, but this would create the lion's share of the entries for you. So lots of different ways to use allocation and entries. Another one I want to talk about is automatic interfund transfers. This is kind of cool because what it does is helps simplify sometimes your unrestricted grant making. What it does is it transfers the total dollars in a specific fund balance out of the fund. So right here, what I'm going to do is say my asset account is my checking, and my transfer account is going to be, my debit's going to be a transfer. So essentially what I'm doing here by crediting checking and debiting a transfer account, I'm reducing the value of the fund. And here I'm going to say fund balance to transfer out is fund balance 3. I'm going to filter the funds that I want this to look at. I want to pull all the money from my unrestricted name funds, and I'm going to put it into a single unrestricted fund so that I can make all of the grants from that one fund. And this is the report. So if you look here, my total fund balances, this transfer out, this is whatever happens to be sitting in fund balance 3, because that's the balance that I told it I needed to transfer the money out. This fund ID, this third one down in the list, Jeff, is not transferring anything. The reason for that is my fund balance 3 is in the negative. So there isn't anything to transfer out of the fund. So this is going to create the entries for me because I have a create GL entries. It's going to create the entries for me, and then all I need to do is make one summary entry to put the money into the other unrestricted fund where I'm going to make all my grants from. So I'm sure it might have other purposes as well, but this is one way to transfer all the money. And it has to be 100%. There's no way to control how much of that fund balance 3 it's being transferred. It's going to transfer all of it. Okay. The next one that I want to talk about is entries from journal history. This one is well used because it can actually do two things. It's a very cool utility. Entries from journal history allow you to copy entries and create new ones based on the copied entries. Or let's say maybe you ran your admin fees. You have hundreds of entries and realize that you forgot to do something before you ran your admin fees. Entries from journal history will create reversing entries automatically for you so that you don't have to manually reverse them all or create some kind of spreadsheet to import reversing entries. Now you have the ability to choose the fiscal year for the historical entries that you want it to look at. You have two radio buttons. One is to copy and one is to create reversing. Now, if you choose to copy entries, you have 3 fields on this screen. One of them is to choose what you want your new apply date to be. what the new journal key is going to be, and if there's a new reference number that you want to put in there. If you're creating reversing entries, then you don't need to fill in any of these fields, because what's going to happen is it's just going to create an exact a reversing entry of what went in originally. So I'm going to choose reversing entries, and I'm going to say okay. So what you have here is, what we generally recommend is you run a journal history report first to make sure that you have the correct beginning and ending journal numbers. And this is regardless of whether you are creating reversing entries or whether you are copying historic entries, because it needs to know what you either want to copy or what you need to reverse. Now, you might notice that when I open this, automatically I already had in my selection criteria the GL journal history journal number. And the reason that that's here is under saved reports. I actually created a saved report and named it default. So what I did is I went to selections, I added this as a selection criteria, and then I added a new saved report called default. This is good because this is really the only, typically this is the most used filter criteria, because you want to make sure you get just the right journal numbers. So let me put in my journal numbers so I can show you what this looks like. And then I click on Run Report. The nice thing about this is you can run a report and decide if these are the correct entries that you either want to reverse or copy. If you look at these entries and you're like, oh, nope, I'm missing a couple, you just close this screen and rerun it, and nothing has been created in your system. So no journal entries are created until you actually click on Create GL Entries. Now, what we're looking at here is the list of transactions that I've said I wanted to copy or reverse. This isn't the entries that have been created. It will show you the entries that are created when you click on Create GL Entries. And then the last step that you'll need to do is just edit and post those entries to General Ledger. All right, the next one we are going to look at is purge unposted journal entries. So the one thing I want to say about this is to use caution when you're doing this, because you don't want to purge or delete unposted journal entries that may have been created from gift postings or accounts payable postings. If you need to fix transactions that have been created in any of the subledgers or outer modules, you're going to need to go back to the subledger or outer module to fix those, so that you make sure that your outer modules are in sync with your general ledger. So the types of entries that you might be purging here would be, for example, the admin fee entries I created that realized I haven't posted them yet, and I realized I needed to do something else first. I could come in here and purge unposted GL entries. Or maybe you use the entries from journal history and created a whole bunch of reversing entries or copied entries, and then realized you had the wrong sequence of journal numbers that you copied. This would be a good utility for that. But like I say, it's just one of those things, because it's a purge/delete, be careful. So if I go to run process, it's asking me what the apply dates are for the entries that I want to purge, and mine happen to be 8/15/2024, but I also want to filter the actual journal numbers that I want to purge. So I'm sure that only the ones I want to be purged will be deleted. And then when I say okay, Again, the very cool thing is I can look at all of this in my report. So maybe I ran asset rebalancing and realized, ooh, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. So I can just click on delete GL entries. But again, it lets you look at the information before you actually do anything that you can't undo. So when you click on delete GL entries, it literally will delete all of the entries out there. All right, so we're going to look at two cash management features in FIMS. One of them is called automatic cash entries, or cash call for slang, I guess. So if I go to automatic cash entries and run my process, there's two things that automatic cash entries can do. And one thing is that if you've just had a large grant run in your checking account for 15 funds is now sitting in the negative, and you need to cover those negative balances, because typically your checking account, either whether it's a joint account or whether it's a grant account, it should have a zero balance. You don't keep any money in there, but it shouldn't be negative either. So cash call can actually move money from an investment into checking. So if you look here, you can choose the fiscal year, the period. The transfer to account is going to be checking. The transfer from account would be whichever investment account the money's coming from. In this case, I'll say my 14,000. And the next thing that we see here is increase funds with balances less than zero. So if it's got a negative checking account, it's going to pull money from the pool. And then below that, it says replenish funds to a balance of zero. So it's going to pull the money from the investment and cover the grant checks. When I say okay, and I also have this box checked for transfer only if there's sufficient amount in the credit account. You have the ability to filter based on fund codes. So if there's additional filtering you want to do other than just looking to see whether the checking is negative. And here's our report. So my automatic cash entries found a list of funds that have negative balances. So if you notice, it's the amount to transfer in is the exact same amount as it's going to bring me back to zero. And then over here, it's showing me my dispersing account is 14,000 is my pool, what my current balance is in the pool, what the amount that's going to come out, and balance in that pool after the transfer. So if you need to make a physical transfer, you can use this number at the bottom to move 93,000 out of the investment pool and put it into checking. So that's one way that cash call can work. The other way is, let's say that you have received gifts and they've gone into checking. Their first stop in is the checking account, but now you need to take the money out of checking, the excess money out of checking, and put it into the investment pool. So in this case, the transfer to account is going to be my investment pool, and the transfer from account is going to be my checking account. We're not going to use these two options here with the $0, but what we're going to do is we're going to transfer the entire amount from the credit account. So essentially, we're telling the system, bring that checking account to a zero balance. And you can also create, if you're using the AP reconciliation, this would actually be for the first example. If you're using the AP reconciliation, you can create a deposit amount to the checking for reconciliation purposes. And I'm not going to add any additional filters. So this one is showing me current balance in 14,000 And let me look, amount to transfer in. So these are the dollar amounts that are going to get transferred in because that's what is in checking. Here's the entries that it's going to make. And you can create GL entries. So Cash Call is a great tool, but you do have to run it multiple times depending on which way the money is moving. With that said, I'm going to talk about my last tool, and that's the asset rebalancing module. So asset rebalancing is a module in FIMS that it does a couple things. It helps you maintain some preset investment allocations or investment strategies for funds, but it also can be used as a cash management tool. So for example, asset rebalancing can actually do in one process what the cash call routine does with two processes. So in other words, it looks at every fund and it says, okay, do they have negative checking? Well, we need to put money in. Does it have a positive checking? Oh, we need to take money out. And it creates all those entries for you. So it gives you the net dollars and you know exactly how much money has to be moved. So I'm going to go into the asset rebalancing module. So you can get to asset rebalancing from the automatic entries tab. It's the very last option at the bottom, or there actually is a whole separate asset rebalancing tab, super tab in general ledger. And what I have done in this month's handout that you'll be receiving after this session is kind of put some steps. There's actually 7 of them for setting up and running asset rebalancing. So the first step in setting up asset rebalancing and starting to use it is review the system options. So under Tools, System Utilities, System Options, if I go to Funds, there's a few options here that have to do with asset rebalancing. One of them is the Asset Management tab. So you have the ability, whether you're using asset rebalancing or not, to turn on an Asset Management tab in the Fund module. And let me show you what that looks like. So if I go to funds over here on the right-hand side, there's a tab called Asset Management. Essentially, this is showing you the same information that you can see in General Ledger, but if somebody doesn't have access to General Ledger, but it's helpful for them to be able to see this, they can see it over here. So that first option is whether you are going to turn that feature on, that little asset management tab, or not. The next option is, go back here. So if you change your asset strategy code on a fund, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. If you change the asset strategy code, do you want to automatically rebuild the targets? And this is set to yes, so I want this to happen automatically. I can still manually go in and rebuild the targets, but I want it to happen automatically. I also have an option, do I want to show fund assets that are not being rebalanced? So that's essentially saying on that asset management tab, do I want to see all assets, whether they're part of my asset rebalancing or not? And then the last one is, do you also want to see liabilities? So I happen to have everything turned on for my system. So when I go into the fund module, I can see all assets and liabilities. All right, the second piece of this is making sure, because asset rebalancing, when you set your strategies, they're based on pooled assets. So if you're going to use this for cash balancing or cash management for making sure your checking account has $0 in it, You also need to make sure that your checking account has a pool record in the pool. Now, you're not going to allocate anything. You are just simply creating a checking account record and tying to the GL account to it. Because you'll see in a minute, when we set up our asset strategy codes, it's only choosing from pools that are listed in the facts module. And if I go to my little pool tab, you'll notice that none of these boxes are checked. There's no create fund level entries like you would see on a standard pool, book balances, prevent manual transactions. There's nothing on this tab whatsoever. But I do want to bring your attention to this exclude from rebalancing. So if you have an investment pool that you do not want to be included in asset rebalancing, you can check the box right on the investment pool. But this is just a blank record, and the only thing that shows up here is the GL account for the checking account. And like I say, you'll need to do that in order for you to be able to set strategy codes. The next step is actually setting up your investment strategies, and that's right here under Asset Strategy Maintenance. When I click on Run Process, this is another code table in FIMS, like your admin fee code tables or your spending policy code tables. It's just another code table where you can configure what your strategies look like. So for example, if I double click on my cash, well, let me come back to cash for a second. Let me go to my aggressive. So in my aggressive growth, I actually have here that my checking account should have $0. I want 75% in pool A and 25% in pool B. So this is an asset strategy code that'll get assigned to the fund, and I can use asset rebalancing to maintain this 75-25%. Let me go back. I also have a balanced growth, which is 60-40. So you can have, the funds can only have one asset strategy code, but you can have multiple different types of strategies. So let me go back to my cash here, and I'm going to add this. So the reason why I can see this checking, see if I didn't have checking here, I wouldn't be able to choose it. And I'm going to save that. So my cash strategy is basically just saying I want 100% of the money sitting in checking. Or you might have a money market pool. You want 100% sitting in money market pool. But this is where you can come in and set up all of the strategies that you might have. And you might not use this for investment management. You might just simply have a cash strategy, and that's something you can do as well to save you having to run cash call twice, once for each way. You could use asset rebalancing to run that whole tool for you once and then know exactly how much money you need to move. All right. So once you have your strategy codes created, then you need to assign them to the funds. So if I go to my fund targets here, little tab, and this, by the way, is exactly the same tab as what you see, the asset management tab that I enabled in the fund module. So you can either see it here or you can see it in the fund module. And if you notice, I have a strategy that's been assigned to this one that is aggressive. Let me look at my aggressive strategy here and see. Okay, let me go back here. So right now, this particular fund has an aggressive growth. My current percent is 100% in the checking account. So I need to run the process to actually build my target percentages here because that's clearly not correct. But if you click on the binoculars up here, you can see, you can choose which fund you want to see. And when you go back to fund targets, so this one here is a balance strategy. And the first column is what's in the general ledger, the actual dollars in the general ledger. The next column is what the current percentage looks like. And then the third column is your target percentage. So my balanced growth is 60-40. That is my percentage. You can also set a fixed dollar amount. So maybe you wanted $100,000 in assets in pool A and 100% of everything else in pool B. You could set a strategy like that as well. Now, there is two ways you can assign strategy codes to funds. One of them is you literally can just go into the fund, either in general ledger, where we are now, or in the fund module and assign a strategy code by choosing the drop-down from the drop-down list. The other way is in the fund module is, let's see, mass fund field assignment. So you could actually come in here and say, I want to mass add this strategy code of balanced growth. Actually, let me change that here. That's my filter. Here's the field that I'm going to update right here. And here's my strategy code. So the field I want to update is the strategy code I want to add, balanced, and then your filters are at the top. So maybe based on a subtype, you want to filter, or a type, or a fund class. And then when you hit the OK button, it's actually going to mass update all of your funds. So this is a quick way to update the code in the funds, or you can do one at a time. Totally depends on how much control you want. The next step is to run this set strategy targets utility right here. So when I click on run process, I can choose the strategy that I want to set the targets for. Click on set targets, and then I'm going to save them up here. So that means I had two funds that just got the strategy targets updated. Once the targets have been set at this point, you are ready to actually run asset rebalancing entries. And another nice thing about this is, again, you get to review this report before FIMS creates any entries for you. So you can kind of take a look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense. No, this doesn't make sense. There's something not quite right about this. So if I go to asset rebalancing entries, this is my screen here. So what period of time do I want to run this for? So I'm going to run this through the end of 2024, which in this case is December. I have some choices here. The default choice is to only show assets with variances from their targets. So this is going to show you if there's essentially any variances at all, because the variance greater than 0%. You can filter which funds this is going to run for. So I could say I only want to see this for funds that have aggressive growth or balanced growth. Here I'm going to set my GL apply date. So make this 12/31/2024. And I'm going to run GL entries edit report. So what this is going to do, this is going to put a report on the screen for me. Again, I've not created any entries. In this report, so if you look at the John Adams Fund, so here's the recommendation column. This is what John Adams is supposed to have, 75%, 25%, and then the dollar amount. If I look under current status, this is what my current status looks like. So my John Adams Fund has a negative $11,000 in checking. It's got negative in the new training pool. So this last column over here is the variance from what should be correct in the recommendation. So I can see that, yes, there's definitely some variances, and it runs through, it loops through every single fund and gives you a visual of what is going on with each one of these funds. And at the very end of this report, it's going to give you a summary. So down here under pool summary, in order to bring all of these funds back in line with what their asset strategy codes are, here's what I need to do. I need to move money into checking. I need to take money out of pool A, put money into pool B, take money out of my Rolling Hills investment pool, put $2 into my little pool C and take 40,000 out of my new training pool. So this tells you exactly what you need. It nets out all of the differences and tells you exactly what you need to move. If this looks good, you can go ahead and click on the create entries, and this is going to create journal entries to match the actual physical transfers that you're making. Now, another way that you can actually use asset rebalancing, for example, let's say that you don't want to physically move money every time you run this. You really need to bring, in order to allocate fax earnings correctly, you need to bring these funds back in line with what their strategy is, but you may not want to move physical money every time. There's another way that you can run asset rebalancing. And that is, let me put in my two strategies. Let me put my date. And if you notice right here, there's a field that says offset fund. Use if you don't actually want to move money. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put my operating fund in there, and this could be any fund that you want to use. And I'm going to say run my report. So this is going to, basically all this stuff at the top of the report is going to be the same because the variances are all going to be the same. But at the bottom, what's going to happen is all of those entries that I needed to make, the transfers that I needed to physically transfer, since they're not happening, what it's doing is, and don't mind I have some issues with some of my pools here, but what's going to happen is it's going to make offsetting entries into my operating fund. So the net debits and credits for each one of those cash and investment accounts is $0 because I can't create journal entries in FIMS that say I'm moving money if I'm not really moving money. So this is using my operating fund as the offset to all the entries that need to be made in order to bring all my funds in line with their strategy codes. Then what happens is part of the process is you're going to look at the trial balance for your operating fund, and that's going to tell you whether you actually physically need to move money or not. So when you need to move money, all you have to do is make a couple journal entries in your operating fund for the actual physical transfers. All right. So I think that is the last of what I had to share with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Robin. That was great information. I'll go back and take your screen back from you.
Okay.
There are no additional questions that I've seen come in.
Okay.
But I do have my email address up there to show you all in case you want to reach out. You can also use our general information at hello or fims@npac.com. Feel free to send an email if you have additional questions. We'll make sure to get them to Robin for answers. Let's see. We're planning our next Let's Talk Solutions in May of 2025. Hopefully we'll be able to send those topics out to you next month so that you can sign up and get ready for that one. Any additional information you need to share, Robin?
I think that's it.
And
I'd be
thank you all
happy.
for coming today.
Yep, and I'd be happy to help anybody if they've got questions or want to talk through scenarios.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And that's the end of our event.